The sun was setting over the bustling city skyline, casting a golden glow over the streets below. Among the towering skyscrapers stood a boutique unlike any other, a haven of luxury and exclusivity, where the wealthy came to indulge in the finest items money could buy. Its name, Elysian Luxe, was synonymous with opulence, and its clientele consisted of celebrities, socialites, and the ultra-rich. But tonight, the boutique's true owner, Elijah Carter, sat in his penthouse suite, staring out at the city with a contemplative expression. At 45 years old, Elijah was a self-made billionaire, a man who had clawed his way up from poverty to build an empire. His journey had been anything but easy. Born into a working-class family, he had faced discrimination, hardship, and countless obstacles on his path to success. Yet, through sheer determination and brilliance, he had risen above it all. Elysian Luxe was his pride and joy, a symbol of everything he had achieved. But lately, whispers had reached his ears. Stories of staff treating certain customers poorly, of judgmental glances and dismissive attitudes. It was the kind of behavior Elijah despised, the very thing he had fought against his entire life. If these rumors were true, they threatened not only the reputation of his brand but also the values he held dear. Elijah leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, he would visit the boutique himself, not as the billionaire owner, but as an ordinary man. He wanted to see the truth with his own eyes, to experience firsthand how his staff treated people who didn't fit the mold of their usual clientele. By the time the first rays of dawn pierced the horizon, Elijah had already made his preparations. Gone was the tailored suit and polished shoes that marked him as a man of wealth. In their place, he wore a simple hoodie, faded jeans, and scuffed sneakers. A baseball cap pulled low over his face completed the look. To anyone who saw him, he would appear as just another man wandering the city streets. As he approached the boutique, Elijah felt a mix of anticipation and unease. The store's exterior was as grand as ever, with its glass facade glinting in the sunlight and its name etched in gold above the entrance. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The interior was a testament to luxury. Marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and the air was filled with the faint scent of expensive perfume. Shelves lined with designer handbags, jewelry, and clothing stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a world Elijah had built from the ground up, yet today, he felt like an outsider. As he wandered through the store, he noticed the way the staff's eyes flicked toward him. Their gazes weren't welcoming, they were assessing, scrutinizing. He could almost hear the unspoken judgments. What is he doing here? Can he even afford anything? Excuse me, Elijah said, approaching a display of watches. The sales associate, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, glanced at him briefly before turning her attention back to her phone. Yes? She said, her tone disinterested. I was wondering about this watch, Elijah began, pointing to a sleek timepiece encased in glass. Could you tell me more about it? The woman sighed, setting her phone down with exaggerated reluctance. That's the Chronos Elite, she said, her voice flat. It's one of our most exclusive pieces. It's quite expensive. Elijah raised an eyebrow. How much? It starts at $150,000, she replied, her eyes narrowing slightly. Are you sure you're in the right store? The question hung in the air like a slap. Elijah felt a pang of anger but kept his expression neutral. I'm just browsing, he said calmly, as he moved to another section of the store. He couldn't help but notice the way the staff whispered among themselves, their glances following him wherever he went. He overheard snippets of their conversation. Does he even know what these things cost? Probably just here to waste time. But it wasn't until he encountered the store manager that the situation truly escalated. Richard, the boutique's manager, was a tall man in his early 40s, with slick back hair and a tailored suit that screamed authority. He approached Elijah with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good afternoon, Richard said, his tone polite but icy. Can I help you with something? Elijah returned the smile. I was just looking around. It's a beautiful store. Richard's smile faltered for a moment. Yes, well, we do cater to a very specific clientele. If there's something you're interested in, I'd be happy to assist. But, we don't usually allow browsing for extended periods. Elijah tilted his head, feigning confusion. Is that a policy? It's more of an understanding, Richard replied, his voice dripping with condescension. You see, our items are exclusive. We prefer to focus our attention on serious buyers. The implication was clear, and Elijah felt his patience wearing thin. But instead of confronting Richard, he decided to push further. I was actually considering buying something, he said, gesturing toward a display of cufflinks. Could you tell me about these? Richard's expression tightened. Those are handcrafted from platinum and encrusted with diamonds, he said curtly. They are $25,000. Elijah nodded thoughtfully. They are beautiful. Richard's smile returned, but it was tinged with mockery. Yes, they are. But perhaps something more modest would be a better fit for you. The words were a dagger, sharp and deliberate. Elijah met Richard's gaze, his own expression unreadable. I'll think about it, he said, turning to leave. As he walked out of the store, Elijah felt a storm brewing inside him. He had seen enough. The rumors were true, and the behavior he had witnessed was unacceptable. But he wasn't just angry, he was determined. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been judged, dismissed, or mistreated because of how they looked or where they came from. Elijah knew what he had to do. Tomorrow, he would return, not as the man they thought he was, but as the man he truly was. And this time, there would be consequences. Elijah Carter stood in front of the mirror in his penthouse suite the next morning, adjusting the cufflinks on his tailored navy blue suit. The man staring back at him was a far cry from the one who had walked into Elysian Lux the day before. Gone were the faded hoodie and scuffed sneakers. Today, he was every bit the billionaire mogul, exuding power and authority. But beneath the polished exterior, his mind churned with the events of the previous day. The condescension, the judgmental stares, the outright dismissal. It wasn't just offensive, it was personal. Elijah had built Elysian Lux to be a sanctuary of elegance and inclusivity. A place where anyone could feel valued regardless of their background. Yet, the very people he entrusted to uphold those values had betrayed them. He glanced at his watch. It was time. When Elijah stepped into the boutique that morning, the air seemed to change. The staff, who had been casually chatting among themselves, froze as they recognized the man who had just entered. Whispers rippled through the room like a wave. That's him, one of them murmured, eyes wide. Elijah Carter, another whispered, standing a little straighter. Even Richard, the store manager, appeared momentarily stunned. But he quickly composed himself, plastering on a smile as he approached Elijah. Mr. Carter, Richard exclaimed, his voice dripping with false warmth. What an honor to have you here. We weren't expecting you today. Elijah's expression was unreadable as he extended a hand. Good morning, Richard, he said, his tone calm but firm. I thought I'd stop by to see how things are running. Of course, Richard said, his smile faltering slightly. Everything is running smoothly. Is there anything specific you'd like to see? Elijah's eyes scanned the room, taking in the staff who now stood at attention, their earlier nonchalance replaced with nervous energy. Not yet, he said. I'd like to take a moment to observe. Richard hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. Of course, he said finally. Let me know if you need anything. Elijah nodded and began to walk through the store, his presence commanding attention. He stopped at the same display of watches he had visited the day before, his mind replaying the dismissive tone of the sales associate. She was nowhere to be seen now, likely hiding in the back room. As he moved to the section where the cufflinks were displayed, Elijah noticed a young couple browsing nearby. They were dressed modestly, the man in a simple button-up shirt and the woman in a floral dress. They appeared hesitant, as if unsure whether they were welcome in such an opulent setting. Elijah watched as one of the staff, a tall woman with a tight bun and an air of superiority, approached them. Her smile was thin, almost forced. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. The man hesitated. "We were just looking at these cufflinks," he said, gesturing toward the display. "They are beautiful." The woman's smile tightened. They are also quite expensive. Perhaps I could show you something more affordable." Elijah felt a surge of anger but kept his composure, watching as the couple exchanged a glance, their excitement dimming. "No, thank you," the man said quietly, taking his partner's hand and leading her away. Elijah turned to Richard, who had been hovering nearby. "I'd like to speak with you in private," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. In the boutique's back office, Richard sat across from Elijah, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The room was silent for a moment, the tension palpable. "Do you know why I'm here, Richard?" Elijah asked finally, his voice calm but cold. Richard hesitated. "To check on the store?" Elijah's gaze was piercing. "Partially. But more importantly, I'm here because of what I experienced yesterday when I walked into this store." Richard's face paled. "Yesterday?" "Yes," Elijah said, leaning forward slightly. "I was here, dressed differently, but still the same man. And I was treated with disrespect and condescension by multiple members of your staff, including you." Richard opened his mouth to respond, but Elijah held up a hand, silencing him. "Do you know what I saw this morning?" Elijah continued. "A young couple, clearly excited to be here, treated as if they didn't belong. Just like I was yesterday. This isn't just about me, Richard. This is about the culture you've allowed to fester in this store." "Mr. Carter, I assure you," Richard began, but Elijah cut him off. "Don't assure me," he said sharply. "Show me. Explain to me why the values I built this brand on, respect, inclusivity, excellence, are being ignored in my own store." Richard was silent, his face a mask of discomfort. Elijah stood, his presence towering. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to gather every member of your staff in the main room. Now." When the staff assembled in the center of the boutique, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Elijah stood before them, his expression unreadable as he scanned their faces. "Yesterday," he began, his voice carrying through the room, "I walked into this store dressed like an ordinary man. And I was treated like I didn't belong. I was judged, dismissed, and humiliated. Not because of who I am, but because of how I looked." The staff exchanged nervous glances, some shifting uncomfortably under his gaze. "This store," Elijah continued, "was built on the idea that luxury is not just about the products we sell, but about the experience we provide. An experience that should make every person who walks through those doors feel valued and respected. Yesterday, that ideal was shattered." He turned to Richard. "As the manager, you are responsible for setting the tone of this store, for ensuring that your staff upholds the values of this brand. And you have failed." Richard's face was pale, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. "I want each of you to think about what this brand represents," Elijah said, addressing the staff as a whole. "And I want you to ask yourselves if your actions reflect those values. Because if they don't, you don't belong here." The room was silent, the weight of Elijah's words hanging heavy. "Effective immediately," Elijah said, his voice firm, "Richard is no longer the manager of this store. I will be conducting a full review of every employee's conduct. And changes will be made to ensure that this never happens again." Richard's jaw dropped, but he said nothing, his face a mask of shock and humiliation. Elijah turned to the staff. "This is your chance to do better. To be better. Don't waste it." With that, he walked out of the store, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The news of what had transpired at the Elysian Luxe flagship store spread like wildfire. Within hours, whispers of Elijah Carter's unannounced visit and the dramatic firing of the store manager, Richard, reached every corner of the company. Employees across the brand's global network were abuzz with speculation, wondering what this meant for the future of the business, and for their own roles within it. But for Elijah, the work was only just beginning. Sitting in his sprawling penthouse office later that evening, he stared at the city lights twinkling below, his thoughts racing. He had always known that building a brand was one thing, but maintaining its integrity was another challenge entirely. What he had witnessed in his own store was a betrayal, not just of him, but of the values that had driven him to create Elysian Luxe in the first place. The next morning, Elijah called an emergency meeting with his senior leadership team. The conference room was a picture of modern elegance, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city and a sleek glass table at its center. One by one, the executives filed in, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. They knew Elijah well enough to recognize the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. Once everyone was seated, Elijah stood at the head of the table, his hands resting on the cool glass surface. He let the silence linger for a moment, the weight of his presence filling the room. Yesterday, he began, his voice steady but firm. I walked into one of our flagship stores as an ordinary customer. What I experienced was nothing short of disgraceful. The room was silent, the executives exchanging uneasy glances. I was judged based on my appearance, Elijah continued, his gaze sweeping across the table. Dismissed, disrespected, and treated as if I didn't belong. And I wasn't the only one. I saw other customers, people who came into our store excited to experience what we offer, treated the same way. He straightened, his voice gaining intensity. This is not what Elysian Luxe stands for. This is not what I built. One of the executives, a woman named Claire who oversaw customer experience, spoke hesitantly. Mr. Carter, on behalf of the team, I want to apologize for what you went through. This is unacceptable, and we will take immediate steps to address it. Elijah nodded, but his expression remained stern. Apologies are a start, Claire, but they are not enough. This isn't just about one store or one team. This is about a culture that has been allowed to take root, a culture of exclusivity, not in the products we sell, but in the way we treat people. He paused, letting his words sink in. And that ends now. Over the next hour, Elijah outlined a series of sweeping changes. Mandatory inclusivity and customer service training for all employees. A new system for monitoring and addressing customer feedback. A restructuring of the management hierarchy to ensure accountability at every level. And perhaps most importantly, a personal commitment from Elijah himself to be more present, more involved, and more visible within the company. This isn't just about fixing what's broken, he said, his voice resolute. It's about setting a new standard. For our brand. For our industry. For what luxury truly means. Later that week, Elijah returned to the flagship store, not as the disguised customer he had been before, and not as the imposing billionaire who had fired Richard, but as a leader determined to rebuild. The atmosphere in the store was markedly different. The staff, now under the guidance of a new interim manager, greeted him with genuine warmth and respect. The tension that had once clouded the air was replaced with a sense of purpose. Elijah spent hours walking through the store, speaking with employees, asking questions, and listening to their concerns. He wanted to understand not just what had gone wrong, but why. What he discovered was both disheartening and enlightening. Many of the staff admitted, in hushed tones, that they had felt pressured to maintain an image of exclusivity that often bordered on elitism. They had been trained to prioritize high-profile clients and big spenders, sometimes at the expense of treating other customers with basic respect. It was a mindset that had been subtly ingrained over time, and one that Elijah knew would take time to undo. But there were also glimmers of hope. Several employees expressed genuine excitement about the changes Elijah had announced. They wanted to do better, to be better, and to help restore the reputation of the brand they had once been proud to represent. As Elijah listened to their stories, he felt a renewed sense of determination. This wasn't just about policies and procedures, it was about people. About creating an environment where every employee felt empowered to embody the values of Elysian Lux. And where every customer felt valued, regardless of their background or bank account. The turning point came a few days later, when Elijah decided to host a town hall meeting for all employees at the flagship store. The event was held in the boutique itself, after hours, with the marble floors cleared of displays to make room for rows of chairs. The staff, dressed in their uniforms, sat quietly as Elijah took the stage. He began by sharing his own story, of growing up in a working-class neighborhood, of being judged and underestimated, of fighting to prove his worth in a world that often seemed determined to keep him down. He spoke of the values that had guided him throughout his journey: respect, integrity, and the belief that true luxury was about more than just material possessions. "When I created Elysian Lux," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I wanted it to be a place where anyone could walk through those doors and feel like they belonged. Like they were part of something special. That's what luxury means to me. And that's what it should mean to all of us." He paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. "But somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. And that's on me. As your leader, it's my responsibility to ensure that our values are not just words on a wall, but principles we live by every day." The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "I'm not here to point fingers or place blame," Elijah continued. "I'm here to fix what's broken. And I need your help to do it." He outlined his vision for the future of Elysian Lux, a vision built on inclusivity, respect, and excellence. He spoke of the changes that were already underway, and the role each employee would play in shaping the brand's new direction. By the time he finished, the room was buzzing with energy. The staff, who had initially been wary of Elijah's visit, now felt inspired and motivated. For the first time in a long time, they saw a leader who wasn't just demanding change, but leading it by example. As the meeting came to a close, Elijah looked out at the crowd and smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "This is our chance to redefine what Elysian Lux stands for," he said. "Let's make it something we can all be proud of." The room erupted in applause, the sound echoing off the marble walls. For the first time since the incident that had brought him here, Elijah felt a sense of hope. The road ahead would be long, but he was ready to walk it, together with his team. The weeks that followed the town hall were a whirlwind of transformation. Elijah Carter threw himself into the task of rebuilding Elysian Lux from the inside out, determined to not only repair the damage but to create a foundation so strong that nothing like this could ever happen again. The first step was education. Elijah partnered with renowned experts in customer service, inclusivity, and workplace culture to design a comprehensive training program for every employee. The training wasn't just about teaching the staff how to be polite, it was about helping them understand the deeper values of empathy, respect, and connection. The sessions were intense and, at times, uncomfortable. Employees were asked to confront their own biases, to reflect on moments when they might have judged others unfairly, and to share their experiences in a safe and open environment. For many, it was a wake-up call. They began to see how their actions, whether intentional or not, had contributed to a culture that excluded rather than welcomed. Elijah made it a point to attend several of these sessions himself, sitting among his employees as an equal rather than a boss. His presence sent a powerful message: that this wasn't just a corporate initiative, but a personal mission. One afternoon, during a particularly emotional session, a young sales associate named Mia stood up to speak. Her voice trembled as she recounted an incident from a few months earlier, when she had dismissed a customer based on their appearance. "I thought I was doing my job," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was protecting the brand. But now I realize I was wrong. That person deserved better. Everyone does." Elijah approached her after the session, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Acknowledging our mistakes is the first step toward growth, he said. What matters now is what we do moving forward. As the training programs progressed, Elijah also turned his attention to the physical space of the boutique itself. He wanted the store to reflect the values of the brand, not just in its products, but in its design and atmosphere. He brought in a team of architects and interior designers to reimagine the layout, creating spaces that felt inviting and inclusive. The changes were subtle but impactful: softer lighting, comfortable seating areas, and displays that encouraged exploration rather than intimidation. The centerpiece of the redesign was a new feature Elijah called the Story Wall. It was a stunning digital installation that showcased the stories of Elysian Luxe customers from all walks of life. Each story was accompanied by a photo and a short video, highlighting the unique journeys and aspirations of the people who loved the brand. This wall is a celebration of our customers, Elijah explained during the unveiling. It's a reminder that luxury isn't just about what we sell, it's about the lives we touch. The story wall quickly became a favorite among visitors, who often stopped to watch the videos and read the stories. It created a sense of connection and community that had been missing before. Transforming the boutique into more than just a store, it became a place where people felt seen and valued. One of the biggest challenges Elijah faced was winning back the trust of the public. News of the incident at the flagship store had spread far and wide, and while some praised Elijah for taking swift action, others were skeptical. To address this, Elijah decided to be transparent about the changes he was making. He invited journalists and influencers to tour the newly redesigned store, meet the staff, and learn about the initiatives Elysian Luxe was implementing. He also sat down for an exclusive interview with a prominent lifestyle magazine, where he spoke candidly about his own experiences and the lessons he had learned. "I've made mistakes," he admitted during the interview. "But I believe that mistakes are opportunities for growth. What happened at Elysian Luxe was a wake-up call, and I'm committed to ensuring that we come out of this stronger and better than ever." The interview resonated with readers, many of whom appreciated Elijah's honesty and vulnerability. Slowly but surely, the public perception of Elysian Luxe began to shift. One day, as Elijah was reviewing reports in his office, he received an unexpected visitor. It was the young couple he had seen in the store on the day of his undercover visit, the couple who had been dismissed by the sales associate. They introduced themselves as Daniel and Sophia, explaining that they had read about the changes Elijah was making and wanted to thank him in person. "We never expected to hear from you after what happened," Daniel said, his voice filled with emotion. "But seeing how much you care, how much effort you put into making things right, it means a lot." Sophia nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "You've inspired us," she said. "Not just as customers, but as people. Thank you for showing us that change is possible." Elijah was deeply moved by their words. He invited them to tour the newly redesigned store and even gifted them a pair of custom-made cufflinks, a gesture that symbolized not just reconciliation, but a new beginning. As the months went by, the greatest reward was the sense of pride he felt when he walked into the store and saw the difference firsthand. One evening, as he stood in front of the story wall, watching the faces of customers light up as they shared their own stories, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. This was what he had always envisioned for Elysian Luxe, a brand that wasn't just about luxury, but about humanity. But just as Elijah began to feel that the storm had passed, a new challenge emerged, one that would test everything he had worked so hard to achieve. One of the company's most prominent investors, a powerful and influential figure in the fashion industry, expressed concerns about the direction Elijah was taking. "I understand your vision," the investor said during a tense meeting. "But let's not forget what makes Elysian Luxe successful. Exclusivity sells, Elijah. It's what sets us apart. If you dilute that, you risk losing everything." Elijah listened carefully, his mind racing. He knew the investors' concerns weren't entirely unfounded. The luxury market thrived on exclusivity, and there was always a risk that broadening the brand's appeal could alienate its core clientele. But Elijah also knew that the old way of doing things was no longer sustainable. The world was changing, and so was the definition of luxury. This isn't about diluting the brand, he said firmly. It's about redefining it. True exclusivity isn't about shutting people out, it's about creating something so extraordinary that everyone wants to be a part of it. The investor remained skeptical. But Elijah was resolute. He had come too far to turn back now. Elijah Carter stood in the heart of the Elysian Luxe flagship boutique, the story wall glowing softly behind him. Tonight was a special night, an exclusive gala to unveil the brand's new vision to the world. The store had been transformed into an elegant event space, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the marble floors and soft music filling the air. The guest list was as diverse as the city itself. Celebrities mingled with everyday customers. Fashion influencers stood side by side with local community leaders, and journalists from around the globe eagerly awaited Elijah's speech. It was a testament to the transformation he had worked so hard to achieve, a symbol of the inclusivity he had fought for. But Elijah knew that tonight wasn't just about celebration. It was about proving to the world, and to himself, that Elysian Luxe could thrive not despite its new values, but because of them. As the clock struck 8, the lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. Elijah stepped onto the stage, his tailored suit immaculate, his presence commanding. He looked out at the sea of faces, taking a moment to let the significance of the moment sink in. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This event is more than just a celebration of Elysian Luxe, it's a celebration of change, of growth, and of the belief that luxury is about more than what we sell. It's about the experience we create and the lives we touch." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Over the past few months, we've faced challenges that forced us to confront some hard truths. We realized that we had lost sight of the values that should define us, not exclusivity in the sense of exclusion, but exclusivity in the sense of excellence. Excellence in how we treat our customers, our employees, and our community." The audience listened intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and admiration. "Tonight," Elijah continued, "I'm proud to share with you the next chapter of Elysian Luxe. A chapter where luxury is not about who you are or how much you have, but about how we make you feel. A chapter where everyone who walks through our doors is treated with dignity, respect, and care." He gestured toward the story wall, which came to life with images and videos of customers from all walks of life. A young artist who had saved for months to buy her first designer handbag. A retired teacher who had been gifted a watch by her students. A couple celebrating their anniversary with a piece of jewelry that symbolized their love. "These are the people who inspire us," Elijah said, his voice filled with emotion. "These are the stories that remind us why we do what we do. And these are the moments that define true luxury." The room erupted in applause, the sound echoing off the boutique's high ceilings. Elijah felt a surge of pride and relief, but he knew the night was far from over. As the evening continued, Elijah made his way through the crowd, engaging with guests and listening to their feedback. The response was overwhelmingly positive, but there was one conversation that stood out. A woman in her 60s approached him, her eyes bright with determination. "Mr. Carter," she said, extending a hand. "My name is Margaret. I've been a customer of Elysian Luxe for over a decade, and I have to admit, I was skeptical about the changes you've been making." Elijah shook her hand, his expression open and attentive. "I appreciate your honesty, Margaret. What changed your mind?" She smiled, glancing at the story wall. "You did. Seeing how much you care, how much effort you put into making things right, it's inspiring. You've reminded me that luxury isn't just about the products we buy. It's about the people behind them." Her words struck a chord with Elijah, reaffirming his belief that he was on the right path. But not everyone was as supportive. The investor who had voiced concerns about the brand's direction was also in attendance, and Elijah could feel his gaze from across the room. Toward the end of the night, the investor approached him. a glass of champagne in hand. "Elijah," he said, his tone measured. "I have to admit, tonight has been impressive. But I still wonder, can this vision of yours sustain the brand in the long run? Can inclusivity and luxury truly coexist?" Elijah met his gaze, unwavering. "They don't just coexist," he said firmly. "They elevate each other. True luxury isn't about shutting people out, it's about creating something so extraordinary that everyone wants to be a part of it. And that's exactly what we're doing." The investor studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I hope you're right," he said. "For all our sakes." As the gala drew to a close, Elijah found himself standing alone in front of the story wall, the images of customers flickering softly in the background. He thought about everything it had taken to get to this point, the challenges, the setbacks, the moments of doubt. But he also thought about the progress they had made. The staff who had embraced the new training with open hearts and minds. The customers who had returned, not just because of the products, but because of the experience. The stories that now defined Elysian Luxe, each one a testament to the power of connection and care. For the first time in a long time, Elijah felt at peace. He knew there would always be challenges ahead, but he also knew that he had built something worth fighting for. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of his reflection in the glass. The man staring back at him was no longer just a billionaire or a businessman. He was a leader, a visionary, and a believer in the idea that luxury could be a force for good. And with that thought, Elijah Carter stepped into the night, ready to embrace whatever came next. Months later, Elysian Luxe was thriving in ways Elijah could never have imagined. Sales had reached record highs. But more importantly, the brand had become a symbol of change in the luxury industry. Other companies began to follow suit, adopting similar initiatives to prioritize inclusivity and customer experience. Elijah's story was featured in magazines, documentaries, and even a best-selling book. But for him, the greatest reward was the knowledge that he had stayed true to his values, and in doing so, had redefined what luxury truly meant. Because in the end, Elijah Carter had proven one simple truth: that the most valuable thing any brand can offer isn't exclusivity or prestige. It's humanity.